share with you a little bit of who we are and what we do. We're very honored and we're very grateful for this few moments. I hope we can use your time well. I'm right in the midst of it. You know, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, I always say these pictures are worth 2,000 of my words. So we're going to show you some of the pictures there. And let's start with just a little bit of an introduction. Sister, come hold the map up. We referred to it. And of course, we had a fantastic year last year. And it was in honor of Our Lady of Fatima. And you know what Our Lady of Fatima said to all of us throughout the world, you know, is pray for the conversion of Russia. Some of you, I'm sure here, grew up like I did. After every Mass, every church was asked by the Pope to say prayers for the conversion of Russia. How many of you remember that? All right, a few of us here. Okay, now this is, you're going to have to step back even a little more. I don't know. Well, we're going to have to turn two different ways. People here can see it first. Oh, would that help? Is that better? Is that better? Yes, hello. Now it's 3,000 words. All right. If I talk this loud, can everyone hear? I know what it's like to be hard of hearing. All right, just to see Russia is 11 time zones, almost 3 times the width of the United States, and much wider than we are. And you can see it goes from here. This is all Russia, 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 Russia. And we are in the Florida of Russia, we call it. We're Russia's Miami. Turn this way just a little bit. See, this is all from this orange line all the way across is Russia. It takes us, our bishop is up here someplace, it takes us 4 hours to fly to see the bishop. Our parish is half the size of the United States, if you think your parish is big. Our diocese is the size of the United States and Canada put together. So pray for us. we have quite a challenge. Did everybody over here see it? Have a pretty good vision of it. That's all of Russia, and the width of it is enormous. All right. So now there's one of the sisters did up a history of the church in far eastern Russia. That's where we are. That's where that lower part. We have Siberia above us, and like they say, we are in Miami. It's not the same as the Miami here. The temperature gets down into the minus degrees quite often with a lot of ice. Anyway, just to touch on the history. I always find it very fascinating how the faith gets started in different countries. How it got started in Korea, how it got started in Taiwan and so forth. Just fascinating. But there was one priest that covered our entire diocese. Now that's the size of the United States and Canada. He spent most of his time traveling between the stations where he would go, say Mass, give the people a few sacraments. It would be months before he could come back. But that's the start of the faith there in far eastern Russia. And slowly a lot of Catholics came from like Poland and some of those countries. It's interesting how God works, because once Russia took over some of those Catholic countries, they would gather up the people and ship them all the way across Russia. A lot of the Polish people were skilled in building, so they built the railroad from Moscow on over, and many of them remained and converted the people. I remember on my first visit to Russia, meeting a lady from the Ukraine, and she was there in the town with her family. The town had been the head base for the Russian Air Force, National Air Force. And they shipped in carloads of people to farm and to grow food to feed the generals and so forth of the Air Force. They had beautiful homes and a big building where they could watch movies and dance. I always remember, I loved to dance. I always remember seeing this beautiful dance floor about 3 times at least as big as this room that they had built for the officers to have their dances and so forth. And anyway, I'll never forget meeting this lady, from a Catholic woman from the Ukraine. Once the communism had collapsed, a lot of the people that had been brought over went back to their home countries. And it had been 20, 30 years. Well, I asked this lady from the Ukraine, why didn't you go home? Why didn't you go back? And she said, well, who would convert the people in my town if I went back? So we called her the Bishop of Romanova. But she did, so sort of all on her own. She kept bringing 1, 2 people into the church and a few others in always. So when the 2 American priests that are our brother order, they're the canons of Jesus the Lord, arrived in Russia in 1991, they were given this parish, half the size of the United States. They didn't have a single church. They didn't own a square inch of land. The government, there was a beautiful church built there. You'll see it. You're going to see it. But the government, when they came in the communists came in 1932, they took the keys of the church away from the priest, locked it, and they put the elderly priest locked him in an apartment, and the younger priest sent to the concentration camps because he was working against the government. That was his crime. And anyway, they had started this parish, and there was 14,000 Roman Catholics in the parish when the communists moved in 1932. I think it's an interesting fact, too, that in 1917, there were a little bit over 17 million Roman Catholics in Russia. Now, that's not counting the Orthodox. And when the communists finished moving across the country and destroying to the ground all the churches, there was about 3 million Roman Catholics left. There'd be about 14 million Roman Catholic martyrs in Russia. They're still finding graves with 70,000 bodies. But anyway, it's I've got to get to the picture pretty soon. But anyway, when the priest arrived, the 2 priests, American priests, arrived there, they just they stayed in their apartment and started learning the language. And once a week they rented a room to have a mass. And then people over there with our work, it's a miracle a minute. Our Blessed Mother just does everything. We just sort of try to keep up with her. But here they are they're just, after a couple years, they have They're just starting to get the language and wondering what are we going to do for our church. And the government decides, let's restore old buildings. Of course, the church was new in 1932, and this is now 1992. So you have a church, and they didn't take care of it. When I arrived, my first visit, the windows were broken, stuffed with rags, boarded up, bricks falling out, and so forth. But anyway, the government said, we want to restore old buildings. And the fathers noticed that in the newspaper, and they said they don't have any money to restore even a doghouse. So my father went to knock on their door and said, you know, if you give that church back to us, we'll restore it for you. And they agreed. So you'll see this beautiful church that we now have there. The fathers worked 16 years. Oh, and so many fun things I can tell you. On my first visit, the best workers the fathers could find were the Chinese. And if you saw where we were located down there, we're just a little bit away from Japan, China, Korea. But anyway, he hired a team of Chinese to try to go too fast, to restore it. And I just got the biggest kick out of it. At that time, they were outside the building, and if a brick was cracked or damaged or chipped in any way, the Chinese were chiseling the brick out, and then the priest had bought another big brick building that was built at the same time as the church, so the bricks matched, and the Chinese would put another one in. And it looks like a brand new building now. But this is what really made me laugh. The Chinese are up on the scaffold, working away, several of them, and they all have a suit and tie on. I stood there looking, this, I don't know, I never got to ask them exactly why they dressed that way to come to work. But anyways, we got the church back, and the fathers worked 16 years trying to get donations and fix this up and fix this and the other thing. And finally, another one of the sisters and I went over in, wasn't it 2008, sister? We went to where they reconsecrated the church. The fathers had it fixed up. They had the bishop come, and they reconsecrated the church. And I can remember the most powerful moment for me was at the consecration. And first the priest had said, Father Myron had said, they tried to kill Christ and drive him out of Russia completely, and he's back. And when they raised the host and so forth, and the consecration, it was just a very, very, very special moment for all of us, priests and sisters and the people, that indeed Christ had not been conquered and was back. And now we have the job. You saw how big the country is, and there's just a few little handful of priests and sisters to cover that whole area. But now let's see some pictures. I might stop her at certain points just to talk about it. One more nice point that I could explain is, like I say, there were 14,000 Catholics in this church when the communists arrived. And the thing is that as the communists were trying to completely destroy the faith, if you were even caught with a holy card, you were killed. The last, they martyred all. One day alone, they rounded up 7,000 Catholics and marched them out into a field and buried them, and so forth. But anyway, the last 4 martyrs that are known of were 4 men, and they were meeting together in a home on Sunday afternoon. They had no priest for years by then, nothing. And they said, we've got to hang on. So there were 4 of them, and they'd meet together on a Sunday afternoon and say the rosary. Well, they got caught and martyred. And we're presenting their cause, trying to present their cause for canonization and so forth. But anyway, why, I'm just going to, one more thing, why our priests ended up there is because a Polish man from Vladivostok, that's our town, was Polish, and when Pope John Paul II was coming to Poland, he said, I have to go. I have to see my Pope, being Polish and proud of it and so forth. So he took a lot of money, and it's a week, it takes a week on the train, a fast train, to go from Vladivostok to Moscow, a week, 9 days, to travel those 13 time zones. But anyway, he went and he heard the Pope, and when he got back home, he said, I got to get something going here for Jesus. This is horrible. There's 1 million people in this town. No church, no priest, no nothing. So he was brave enough to put an article in the newspaper, which you do sort of worried about what's going to happen to you. And 4 other men answered. He just said, any Catholics in the town, would you like to get together? And 4 other men answered, and then a couple other joined them. And they decided that they'd write to the bishop and say, look, we need a priest. Well, Father Myron and Father Daniel were starting a new order of missionaries, and they went to the bishop in Russia to ask could they help. And the bishop said to him, well, yeah, I've only got a couple priests for my whole diocese. You can help. Where would you like to start? And Father Myron said, well, how about Vladivostok? He had a reason. I can't go into all the reasons. And the bishop said, say, miracle a minute here. I just got a letter a couple days ago from 5 men in Vladivostok. They want a priest. Go. So that's sort of how the priest got tied into Vladivostok, and then us sisters came along several years later. But we are there, and you're going to see some of the sisters that are there. And I'll stop it just once in a while to clue in some of the information. Now, you see the sisters? Yes, they are working hard. I'm sure I've kept you longer than you probably wanted. But that's our story. Any have a question or two? Yes.
How many parishioners are in
It's, I don't know. It's a problem. Vladivostok is a city that's very poor. The government spent all its money on Moscow, and so things have pretty well fallen apart, and a lot of the Catholics that the fathers brought into the church moved to different cities, back to Moscow. So the fluctuation of the numbers in the parish is quite difficult to trace. But at least there's a start. One of the sisters has an apologetics class, and the adults study with her their faith and everything, and they're very excited. Any other quick questions? Anyway, the statue of Mary that you saw way up in the apex of the church, that came from California, from a convent that was closing. And one of the sisters told the fathers, when they were giving the fathers in Russia the statue, they said it's no wonder that statue is going to Russia, because every night before we went to bed, the sisters would all gather around the statue and pray for the conversion of Russia. And that statue ended up there at the very height. It was beautiful. Yes. You should have seen it when I saw it. They worked hard and everything. Yes.
How many of your sisters are over there?
There's 5 there now. So we're just small. We're just starting. But anyway, God is good. Very good.
The only good.
All right. Thank you so much for being here. I would so appreciate if you would take a copy of our newsletter. Maybe Sister, bring the latest one up. Just, if you could, main thing is we need your prayer. We really need prayer. As you see, it's just really, everything we do over there has to be a miracle. Because it's a difficult situation and so forth. And this is the newsletter where you'll see some of the sisters that were over there. This was, two of them took their final vows. And this is a picture of that day. And then one other sister took her first vows and so forth. So we need prayers for our work. It's not easy. But I really appreciate if you take one of the newsletters and just keep it as a reminder that you could pray for us. Thank you very much. Any other questions? You can come up.
In that area.